Hi, everyone. Welcome to the HCBiz show, the show where we take a practical look at the issues impacting the business of healthcare. We tell you what you need to know about them and where the opportunities lie, what risks exist in the situation, and what you should be doing about it right now. And today we're going to be talking about a huge opportunity for a lot of different people in the space, and specifically a $5 billion a year Open Health IT initiative for Medicaid. And this is a huge cost center for healthcare in general. Somewhere around $500 billion a year going into Medicaid. And it's an area that's ripe for innovation. So joining us, we have Roger Maduro from Open Health News, who has been tracking this issue closely. And as always, my co-host Shahid Shah. And actually, Shahid, I'm going to hand off to you for a second here to help us frame this up and tell us, why is this an issue? Why is it important for Medicaid to rethink the way that they're approaching health IT systems and innovation, and why are they doing this now?
Well, so the problem is very similar to the Medicare side, which is that their CMS, the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, is handing out billions of dollars in reimbursements for a variety of different activities. Most of it associated with health for the elderly, but on the Medicaid side, that's for the folks who can't afford their own health insurance, their state-based systems. One of the challenges over the last decade or so has been that data doesn't move very well within their own Medicaid installations, and certainly doesn't move very well across state installations. And so what Medicare has been doing for a long time, and the Meaningful Use Program, MACRA, MIPS, all of these major initiatives have been with the firm intention that in order to scale higher quality, you need to have, meaning higher quality healthcare, you need to have much better systems that know how they work, and they work well with data translation, data transformation, data interoperability. And so what they do is they say, okay, we're going to put in these quality measures, we're going to have these meaningful use incentives, and then they go out to the industry, and then the industry goes and follows those rules and buys healthcare systems, et cetera. There is no such system on the Medicaid side. There's no standard for certification. There's no standards associated with a very specific amount of data that they have to share. But it's the same problem, that in order to get a high quality healthcare system, you need to have high quality data in order to be able to be providing enough information about whether or not care is being presented to the right people have access to care, the proper prevention is being done, and all the kind of things that we all know about on the Medicare side reasonably well. It doesn't really happen that well on the Medicaid side, and that's there's a lot of reasons for that. Some of that happens to be the craft and the information infrastructure that's there today is just very old. There's a lot of legacy there, and sometimes, and depending on who you talk to, this is it's not by accident that these are complex systems by design, because there are a lot of incumbents that need to stay in business for a long time, and therefore if you made everything interoperable, it was easy to replace, easy to add systems to, easy to remove them from. That becomes a problem over time, because then new entrants can come in, and incumbents sometimes feel like, and this is think of it as a conspiracy theory. I'm not saying there's necessary evidence for this, but this is it's a common complaint amongst the consumer class, the ones who are using these kinds of systems. So now, over the last decade or so, open source has hit the government in a variety of different ways. In fact, I've personally worked on a number of systems within government that would not hear about open source 10 years ago. And now it's the opposite, where it is literally the first thing that they look at. And if open source doesn't work, then they go for commercial software. That hasn't actually taken place very well internal to Medicare, Medicaid. And now this offering of trying to focus on creating open systems, and let's not think necessarily about open source first, but about open architecture, open systems, open data, and open source. It's the open part of the conversation that's most important, not the source part of this that's the most important. And that's why it's going to be a good conversation, because the migration has been not swift by any means in government, but it has been real and palpable. And so that's where I think talking about it from the Medicare, Medicaid, both of its side. The Medicaid side is very important here because there are 50 states. They all can operate in whatever form and fashion that they would like to. And that's really where the conversation should start. So, Roger, we'd love to bring you in. One, do you agree with anything that I said? All of what I said? Some of what I said? We'll start there, and then we'll go from that point.
No, I think you're giving a good overview. This is a huge project. Medicaid provides. It's the largest health insurance plan in the United States. It provides medical. It provides medical care for more than 72 million families, and we're probably more than a third of the American people, if you add it up, families including kids, and it spends over $500 million a year paying out for medical care, and you've got a lot of issues. This has existed for 40 years. So what they're dealing with in Medicaid right now is the program is actually administered by the states. So there's a combination of federal funding and federal contributions and state funding and state contributions. And what happened is over the last 40 years, every state and territory actually built a Medicaid management platform to manage the insurance payments, the medical insurance payments, and these are they were built by 5 companies over the last 40 years. So it's a very limited number of companies. Many of the states were built by the same company, and they made sure that they were not interoperable. So each one had to be built from scratch. Okay, and each one, they cannot be. There's no interoperability. There's no way to share. Most of what this platform do are basically the same set of transactions with some different business rules. So the reality is there could have been one universal platform that could have been shared by all the states with some modifications. But it's not how the vendors built them. The vendors built them all from scratch using largely COBOL. Old computer language, and they're 30 to 40 years old. They're showing their age. Most original developers are either retired or they're no longer with us. So even the vendors that created those platforms in the first place, so they're managing them, have a very difficult time maintaining them to begin with. They're also very difficult to configure. A tremendous Obamacare had a major impact on Medicaid and how Medicaid was distributed, and all the states took different stands on Obamacare, so they set up a whole set of different business rules. Very complex to program with the existing platforms. So they've been spending an enormous amount of money, enormous amount of manpower, simply to trying to change business rules, okay, as to what medical care people can obtain and how it can be provided and so on and so forth. So that has been a tremendous problem. They're not flexible, and they do not separate the rules, the business rules, from the data and the processes. So what has happened is so it's very complex. There have been several attempts at modernizing the platforms. So far, every attempt has been a failure. One of the most significant ones was in California last February. Back in 2010, Xerox obtained a $1.7 billion contract to modernize California's Medicaid platform. And in February, they announced that they couldn't do it, and they walked away from the contract. Okay, so then 6 years later. And that has happened, that is kind of what's happening. It's billions of dollars invested in trying to modernize the Medicare platforms, and the attempts are failing. So in a parallel track, what the Centers for Medicaid and Medicare has been doing, CMS, for nearly a decade, they've been studying open source solutions. They've done a tremendous amount of research. They've published They've published several guides. They've also worked with the state of West Virginia, which created back in 2007, 2008. They released this state health IT plan that contained a great deal of open source solutions, proposed open source approach to the whole state health IT, and that has played a major role in what Medicaid has been looking at. So basically, in last year, last year there was a new regulation that was proposed, essentially calling for a new approach to the platforms, and the approach is based on open solutions, cloud-based services, and modular commercial solutions. The whole idea being is they want to create, instead of having a closed monolithic platform that is totally controlled by vendors, by a single vendor, and that can only be modified and managed by a single vendor, they're moving away from that into a framework. It's a modular framework that allows for a tremendous amount of freedom. It's actually really well thought out, okay? So it's a tremendous amount of freedom as to how you adopt the different components, okay? The initial components are the standard. What they're looking for is the standard Medicaid business processes, business tools, okay? But now they're adding, because it's framework, it's open, it's interoperable, it's modular, they're now creating the possibility to add all kinds of interesting components to the platforms that they've never had, such as precision medicine, health information exchanges, the kinds of tools that can help provide higher quality medical care, and also the ability for individual Medicaid recipients to manage their own medical record. So the personal health information exchange is very important. Personal health records, they need to be able to access them with smartphones, for example, so they can manage their own care.
Yeah. So
this is one of those modular, the modular components allows for a great deal of innovation in how this is done.
So Roger, in this case, you've had the scenarios where much of what you're talking about here is actually not that different from the way that regular commercial health insurance is run. So the systems and I shouldn't say the vendors, but the functionality, the capabilities, and the things like that, like anything that Humana or Aetna or United Healthcare is struggling with, the Medicaid folks are also struggling with, except on government dollars, with government closed systems. So yes. Do you agree with that? That you can, if properly open, it means that regular non-Medicaid commercial type carrier companies, which are quite a few, it's not as limited as they are in the Medicaid side, that they can come in and play here as well.
Exactly. That is part of what I find very exciting, in that because it is an open framework, you have the freedom to do all kinds of things, plug in all kinds of components that nobody had even thought about you could do. So there is no reason why a commercial or private sector health insurance company, let's say a little one that wants to offer a fantastic place, they will be able to plug into the framework, with specific sets of permission, okay, and be able to leverage the framework to provide health insurance and to connect their customers, their insured patients, with the right providers and exchange the data, okay? So in a way, it's bypassing. I mean, one of the big issues that they've been dealing with in Medicaid is data blocking, or EHR lock-in, okay? Medicaid simply cannot get the medical data, the medical record of the people that they're paying, whose health insurance they're paying, whose medical care they're paying.
And remember, what's interesting, Roger, is that is not limited to Medicaid. That's limited. That's all commercial payers have the same problem. Like this week, I'm at the AHIP, the America's Health Insurance Plans. That's the association Consumer Engagement and Digital Health Forum. And although this is about consumer engagement and what kind of cool tools we're going to have, et cetera, almost all the conversations end up back here. Where are we going to get the data from?
Yeah.
How's it going to come from the EHRs? How do we push them back in? Where does the portals come from? Right. So what's fascinating about this, especially from the HCBiz perspective, where what can innovators do? You now have the ability to create, if you look at the framework, the open framework that Roger is referring to, and say to yourself, well, how can I build a piece of software, cloud-based or on-prem? And in this case, you have to make sure cloud-based it's a cloud-first, not a cloud-exclusive environment. So you have to be careful when you're building something that you make it, if you run it only in Amazon AWS and it can't move anywhere else, you'll get some limited capabilities. But at some point when high security or other problems come in and they need to install it locally in an environment, that'll be an issue. So always think cloud first, not cloud exclusive. And then think integration first, as opposed to custom development, because there's a lot of code out there. Let's imagine, for example, what is one of the biggest things that a insurance company needs, and whether it's Medicaid or commercial insurance, they need to manage patient registries. So a registration of a patient and all of its activities associated with it. Well, that's also something that EHRs do by nature. It's a simple thing. But more importantly, CRM systems, customer relationship management, and other systems that have nothing to do with healthcare do that reasonably well. There are dozens of these kinds of systems, many open source, some closed source, but they've been around for decades. So if you said to yourself, well, this is an interesting framework, let me look at the core, one key aspect of this, which is patient registration. If I have something that's really cool there, I can offer it. And what will be very interesting is if Medicaid picks that up, it's also possible that the smaller Medicaid partners and the insurers who are Medicaid partners that are actually deploying these services and insurance plans would end up using that. So think about, so I believe it's in Israel, and I could be wrong, but the health insurance companies there, I believe there's like 3, 4, or 5 of them. The insurance companies there manage the electronic health record, and the providers use the insurers' health and EHR, as opposed to the EHR being kept over there. So talk a little bit about what are some of the concrete things, Roger, do you think that our innovators who might be watching this could do today to help them understand what their roadmaps for 2017 should look like in order to help get some of this opportunity that's out there?
Yep, and real quick, Roger, as part of that too, if you could just lay out, high level, what is this framework? Like, what exactly are they doing with the open framework? Just to set the mental context before getting into.
Okay, so this is complex. Medicaid is very complex, and you're dealing with basically an information infrastructure that has been that has existed for 40 years. That has been closed and exclusionary. Okay, so there are only 5 vendors. Okay, for the old Medicaid platforms. So there is really no market. There is no free market. There has not been a free market here. And the way it has worked for the last 40 years is the CMS. The arrangement is that every state builds their own platform, and CMS pays for the bulk of the platform. They will pay for 90% of the cost of implementing the platform after it is certified, and then the state pays 10%. And then once it is implemented and it's running, the federal government, CMS, will pay 75% of the costs, support, maintenance, license fees, and the state will pay 25%. So that's how it has worked, and every state, gets the freedom. Any state gets. I just got a message from David, by the way. He's still trying to get in. You may want to, see if you can get him connected. But anyway, back to what I'm saying. So the approach is CMS is not building the framework and the systems. They passed this regulation, which is actually brilliant because it doesn't mandate specific things. It's not a command and control regulation. It is actually a set of principles. And this is where it gets interesting. This regulation was implemented in December of last year, and it became official in January 1st this year. So we're at the beginning of the whole process of figuring out how this framework is going to work. So there's approximately 30 states that are looking to implement implement their own Medicaid frameworks based on the principles that CMS has laid out, for which they're going to pay the funding. So again, as I said before, the principles are that there's three options. There is open solutions, which can be open source, but there could be commercial solutions that have open APIs, open architecture, essentially an open solution, number one. Number two, cloud services. So like you said, it doesn't, and the cloud services, it doesn't force everything to be on the cloud. Components can be on the cloud, okay? And then the third element is they do allow for commercial products to be plugged into the framework as modules. The important thing being that they cannot be lock-in software. That is to say, they can just plug and play. Don't like that commercial product? Get rid of it. Put another one in. Okay. So they do allow for COTS solutions, but they have to be plug and play, modular solutions.
Gotcha. So they're going to define very clear interfaces that you have to meet if you're going to deliver this type of service or product. It has to be able to talk to these other three products
and
in this way.
What's happening is, again, going back to the set of principles that CMS has laid out, collaboration, interoperability, modularity are all key. So the states are collaborating with each other, and CMS is in the process of setting up a modular, a marketplace of pre-certified solutions, and basically an open source collaborative environment where the states can collaborate and talk to each other and share experiences. So they're all
okay. What's that certification process going to look like? Is that going to kind of follow off what we saw with meaningful use and things like that, or are they taking a different approach this time around?
It's more of a technology certification, and they had a request for information that was due back in August. So they opened it up to the whole community to say, well, how should the certification process work? So it's all, again, they're actually, and they had meetings with tons of respondents to the people and companies and projects that responded to the RFI on the issue of, well, how is this going to be certified? But generally, yes, the idea is you have a piece of technology that performs certain functions. Okay, can this technology fulfill the following requirements of the framework or the platform? And if it does, then that becomes certified, pre-certified. So then the states can go and they can look at the marketplace and say, and if it's pre-certified, historically, CMS allocated the money after the platform was certified. And that could mean an investment of hundreds of millions of dollars building the platform before CMS said, okay, it's certified, it works, okay, it does what it's supposed to do. So the risk is lowered for the states, because now, now they have a marketplace, and they can go and say, well, I need an EHR that is pre-certified to work with the framework. And here's the marketplace, and you have half a dozen EHRs. Okay, and their standard components is being pre-certified, it plugs in. Okay, or it could be a business analysis tool, or it could be an enterprise resource management platform, okay, for managing transactions. So it's modular. So if it's pre-certified, then CMS pays for 90% of the implementation costs upfront. So now you have the money. Now you have the money for the state to pay for that module, that component. So the state doesn't have to spend a huge amount of money up front. They can just pre-certified. We know this works. Other states have implemented it. It works. Okay, so let's go with it. So that's a very critical component of how this is going to work. Again, I mean, we're at the initial stages. So this has all literally been defined, been figured out, been experimented with as we talk. There is no set parameters, and different states are doing different things.
Yeah, although Roger, one thing you could say is that, and welcome, David. Thanks for coming in. If you want to take a second to introduce yourself, please do so, and then we'll continue.
Great. Hi, I'm David Pereira, and my background is mostly in IT infrastructure and outsourcing for the past 20 years, but I recently decided to move into the healthcare space. And because I've known Roger for some time, and so I find it interesting what's occurring in healthcare is, maybe 5 or 6 years back from where the IT market is in the commercial marketplace, and so we're seeing more productization and packaging of services. So that's kind of my background and why I moved into healthcare.
Great, welcome. So we were just chatting about the overall approach that Medicaid is taking with its new open platform, open frameworks, et cetera. And we were talking about the idea of certifications, et cetera. But from an innovator perspective, what I'd like to make sure that our audience understands is that this is literally the creation, as I think Roger just said, the creation of a new marketplace, one that did not exist even as early as 3 months ago, and will undergo some changes, of course, over the next couple of years. But one thing is very clear, that if you know this market even reasonably well, what you're going to do is start studying what it takes to understand how a insurance marketplace works, how are insurance products purchased and delivered, then understand how care and care management and other related activities work inside an insurance company. Because that's really what the Medicaid side is, which is quite different than Medicare, because Medicare is a manager of multiple insurance plans, whereas Medicaid can actually execute care where appropriate, depending on what kind of partnerships it's set up. So when you look at that and you say to yourself, well, what am I good at? I'm good at care coordination, or I'm good at analyzing care gaps, or I'm good at big data analytics with machine learning that can tell us what risks are and how to stratify those risks. I can tell you about mortality rates, right? So when you look at what you're good at, you say to yourself, where does what I'm good at fit in what an insurance company writ large, any insurance company do today? Then you start to say to yourself, well, who are the incumbents in that field? There are obviously guys like IBM Watson, who are not necessarily incumbents because of machine learning, but they've been around that space for a long time. The thing is that what used to not be easy, which is identifying micro areas, micro targeting, should now be possible. And so when you look at the next 2 or 3 years, what's likely to happen? NIST is going to have to get involved in some way, shape, or form for establishing what the level playing field is going to look like. So they're not fully going to be doing that today, but just like with meaningful use, Department of Commerce at some point is going to get involved. When you look and say, well, how would a marketplace like this work? Think to yourself, look at the Department of Homeland Security's CDM program. That's the Continuous Diagnostics and Monitoring Program, which Department of Homeland Security established a couple of years ago when agencies were having trouble figuring out what are all the different cybersecurity tools we need. And so cybersecurity, much like insurance, is 100 different things. And in those 100 different things, there are 100 different ways of doing those 100 different things. And so it's very noisy marketplace. So what they ended up doing was to say, well, what are the big building blocks that we need? Well, we need to be able to identify certain things. I need to be able to assess my cybersecurity. I need to do this. I need to do that. Then they went and made a list of all the vendors in those fields. Then they opened up a RFP to say who wants to sell in this big program here. So there's actually a number of different ways, and we could talk about this in future HCBiz events, where what would the pattern likely look like there? We don't know them yet. I mean, obviously we have a new administration coming in, so there's going to be some potential changes because of the cultural issues at the top. But ultimately, at the mid-level, at the low level here, there should not be any major changes because a lot of that has already been done. So from an innovator perspective, and make sure, Don's going to ask some of these questions as well. What we like to say to our audience is, what should you be doing tomorrow that you're not doing today? How do you adjust your roadmaps? Do you go into this business, or, oh my goodness, it's getting worse and worse, do you get out of it? So tell us, Roger and David, what should the innovators in this field who are thinking of starting a company or have a business unit that wants to move into this, who should be jumping into this marketplace now, and why, or who should be waiting? Maybe a good area as well.
Well, one thing, and then David, I think he's been looking at this closely. I'll just add, the scope, the size of the opportunity. So you're dealing with a closed market. You're dealing with a closed market that has been closed for 40 years. So this is opening up right now. So there's opportunities that have not existed here for the entire, high-tech industry, and in particular, the open source part of the high-tech industry. The scope is, the estimate says it's going to be $5 to $7 billion a year. If you combine the money that the federal government, several different agencies, and state governments are going to invest. And it may seem like a lot of money, but they've been spending, billions and billions of dollars already and failing to modernize the existing platforms. Okay,
now,
number one. Number two.
New, Roger, is that a net new 5 to 7 billion, or are you talking about what their existing appropriations are, and then there will be portions of that will go into this marketplace?
There is existing appropriations and new appropriations. It's complicated because there's a lot of moving parts. Okay, this is huge. It's a very huge, complex market. Okay, but they really are looking forward to innovative companies. Okay, and it's not just in health information technology, but financial services. They're really interested in financial services and fraud detection software.
Right. And to be clear, just a quick note there, if you are in the clinical or electronic healthcare world, you actually are going to be second or third in terms of what you're going to be coming into it, because their bigger problems right now is funding these things and making sure that the money is properly allocated, utilized, and then spent out. Roger's being nice about saying that the guys who are on the finance side are going to get far more attention than anybody on the clinical side.
It's a big issue. The current estimates is that out of $500 billion a year that Medicaid is paying out, okay, $30 to $65 billion a year are fraudulent transactions.
Right.
There's organized crime entities that are literally committing $1 billion a year fraud against Medicaid.
Okay? Are you telling us we're in the wrong business? We should go into that
telling
business?
You, this is amazing what goes on here. So one of the key priorities is to reduce that $30 to $65 billion a year of fraud to, substantially. So this is actually a fantastic investment on the side of the federal government. Mm-hmm. It's one of those things, if you step back and say, they're going to make the money back very quickly.
And on the Fed side right now, there is a program called HFPP. We won't go into too much detail here, but that is a big program. It has a number of different participants in it. So check out HFPP if you have anything in the machine learning, fraud detection, and really forget fraud for a second. This is called anomaly detection. If you have anything that can do anomaly detection through streams of when we say big data, we're not talking about petabyte scale. This is still at the gigabyte and hundreds of gigabytes worth of data rather than the petabytes and exabytes that we're talking about. So anomaly detection, which if you're at all interested in the next generation of machine learning, AI, et cetera, is one key component. Cybersecurity uses anomaly detection for one purpose. Healthcare uses it for another purpose. And anything that you build here in the fraud or anomaly detection can be applied to other health insurance companies. And that's really, as an innovator, one of the things you want to make sure of is try not to get into this business and only go after Medicaid, because what they're trying to do is they're trying to open this up because they realize that the cruft and the crap that gets built and stymied inside the federal government can only be fixed with new entrants. So if you're really good at something else outside of Medicaid, they would love to have you come in. But if you're going to do something specifically for them and it's not been used anywhere else for any other purpose other than this, it's going to be a challenge, because they'll just say, well, I'm just trading one incumbent that's been closed and doesn't know what's going on with another one that might be a startup and it might be a shiny new object, but it's going to lose its shininess very, very quickly. So we make sure that as you're looking to say, do I enter this field, you say, what do I have that could easily apply elsewhere, but also here? Because when you put in RFPs and you put in proposals.
It looks like we lost Shahid here. So unfortunately, with all of our snafus here, we're very close on time. We've got about 2 minutes left. I want to continue out on. I know, David. I apologize. I want to continue out with what Shahid said.
Yeah. So here's my 30 seconds or 1 minute is that, you know, it is a new market opportunity. So regardless of where the $6 billion a year comes from, it's been mainly locked up with about 4 vendors. And CMS has specifically said they want new vendors and innovative solutions and disruptive technology. So they really want to take a leadership role in healthcare. As you're saying, it's really insurance. They're offering insurance, and they want that to be used elsewhere in the market. So I think it's a great opportunity for companies that want to leverage a standardized product across both the government and commercial sectors.
That's great. And David, in your research and everything you've been looking at, are there any particular deliverables or any particular companies out there that are working in the non-Medicaid payer space that Medicaid needs that would be really good entrance into this market?
Yeah, I haven't gotten quite into the payer space yet, so I can't really comment. Yeah.
Okay, fair enough. Shahid, we're not getting any volume from you now. No, sorry, man. It's not coming through. So I think that we've had quite an experience together here today, gentlemen. I think we'll let it wrap. I appreciate your openness and you know, good humor through all of it. And I think that this would probably warrant a redo at some point where we can get into this topic, because it's a huge opportunity. There's a lot of money behind it, and it's a problem that needs to be resolved. So you know, let's connect again afterwards and see when we can get a better platform going and try again.
Okay.
Great.
That's it. And thank you for everyone who suffered through it with us, and we'll talk to you all soon.
Thanks.
Thank
Have
you.
a great day.
Yeah.
Bye now.